Excuse me. The biggest housekeeping thing we still have to do around here is finding where everything is, where these rooms are. So thank you all for being here. And I'm happy to join with my friend Senator Crapo again this year. We're going to reintroduce the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2013. Excuse me. I'm pleased to be joined by leading senators on both sides of the aisle on this. Senator Murray and I have just been at a meeting where Senator Reid is strongly in favor. We introduced this bill, and Mike, what you and I talked about, Rule 14ing it and just moving, because we voted overwhelmingly just 9 months ago to pass it in the Senate, and I'd hoped we could work out whatever we had to with the House, but we ran out of time. But we have an overwhelming majority in the Senate in both parties, and I think now we can work quickly on this. I'm joined today by many dedicated people who work every day with rape victims and with victims of domestic violence. They've asked us, please hurry, please work. I've said many times on the Senate floor from my own experience in law enforcement, you can't, a victim is a victim is a victim. And the police don't pick and choose and say, well, we can try to protect this victim, but not this victim. They want the tools to stop all of it. And if you'd ever been to one of these scenes and seen that, and know that it's possible that we can take steps that might avoid some of this violence, you'd want to move and move very quickly. So every day we wait, it's at human cost. I want to move quickly. The president has assured me that if we do a bill, we may have to make changes with the House, who knows, but basically what we have here, he will sign it. So, Senator Crapo, I know you have to be at another meeting, and we did this on short notice, but please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Senator Leahy. I appreciate our working relationship. We've been working together on various aspects of this issue for years now. And I appreciate this opportunity again to reintroduce the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. And this year, we're going to get it done. It's, as you can see here from the representation of the Senate, it's on a bipartisan basis that we have support for this in the Senate. And Pat and I were just visiting, as we have done dozens and dozens of times, about the fact that we will be working together to make sure we get it across the finish line. For nearly 2 decades, the Violence Against Women Act has been the centerpiece of our nation's commitment to ending domestic violence, dating violence, and sexual violence. Congress reauthorized VAWA in 2000 and again in 2005 with overwhelming bipartisan support, and it's my hope and expectation that we will achieve that again in this Congress. I'm a longtime champion of preventing domestic violence because I've seen the impact of this firsthand in Idaho. This month alone, there have been 4 deaths in Idaho as the result of domestic violence. And these tragic events serve as a reminder that we are far from ending this abuse, though we have made great progress and will continue to make great progress. I stand behind this act because it provides critical support for not only the victims of domestic violence, but for the agencies and other organizations and, frankly, the individuals, so many of whom are here, who are so committed on the ground to making sure that we address this critical issue. As Pat indicated, we have still some issues that remain, and we've got a mutual commitment to each other and to the others who are working to support this legislation that we will work with each other and with the House of Representatives to make the necessary adjustments, if needed, to get that broad bipartisan support and get this bill to the President's desk. Thank you.
Thank you. While we have Senator Murray and Senator Klobuchar, Senator Collins here, I wonder if I might go to the 2 advocates, unless one of you would like to speak first. Sorry. Then I'm going to go to Kim Gandy, who is the President and CEO of National Network to End Domestic Violence, long been an advocate for the Violence Against Women Act. She also has experience as a prosecutor, which I always like, in Orleans Parish, Louisiana. She prosecuted violent offenders and knows what she speaks. So please, it'll be yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, all of the senators who are here. It's so important that you're standing here to introduce this very important legislation. On behalf of the National Network to End Domestic Violence and our 56 state and territorial coalitions, over 2,000 local programs and shelters, millions of victims for whom we advocate, our many national partners here in this room who have worked so hard. I want to thank Senators Leahy and Crapo and all of the co-sponsors and the senators here, Senator Murray in particular, for your leadership and for your model statecraft. Stopping violence against women should not be a political football or a partisan issue. The Violence Against Women Act was reauthorized by unanimous consent in 2000 and again in 2005. So, Senators, your early and bipartisan introduction of this bill sets the stage and demonstrates your understanding of the importance of a Violence Against Women Act that safely and effectively protects all victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. VAWA's reauthorization provides us an opportunity to build on the successes of the current law by including key improvements to protect and provide safety and access to justice for Native Americans, for immigrants, for LGBT victims, as well as victims on college campuses and in communities of color. This is not about identity politics, but about where the unmet needs remain 20 years after the initial passage of the Violence Against Women Act. VAWA is critical to the lives of real people, real victims who need this legislation and who need the services that it provides. We need passage without delay because there will be many issues, not least among them the fiscal cliff, calling for the Senate's attention. And if we don't pass this now, we could have a long wait. And for victims of violence, more waiting means more misery. So we ask you to please act swiftly on a bipartisan basis and pass the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to call on Monica Johnson-Hostler, who's the Executive Director of the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Violence, and she's worked on this at the national and state level for 15 years. Then I thought we'd go Senator Murray, Senator Collins, Senator Klobuchar, and Senator Ayotte.
Thank you, Senator Leahy, and especially to you, Senator Crapo, and all the senators that are up here for moving swiftly to introduce a bipartisan reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. As Kim stated, we thank you for, on behalf of the 56 state and territorial sexual assault coalitions, all of our partners that work with us on the National Task Force to Ending Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. We are grateful to have each of you here, and this day is encouraging to be standing here with bipartisan support, speaking the same way about how we protect and seek services for all victims. As Kim stated, the Violence Against Women Act has been around for decades, and what we're doing now is moving to make sure that we are addressing the needs of all victims. Those 1,300 rape crisis centers that we represent across the country from coast to coast continue to reach out to us and talk about the need that they are still needing to serve victims. There are still sexual assault victims, as I had yesterday, call me saying, how long do I have to wait before someone calls me back from law enforcement? Having been an advocate for 18 years, I actually haven't had a crisis call in about 5 years. And just yesterday I had a call, and it was a poignant reminder of why I'm here today and why I'm standing before you with bipartisan support, speaking on behalf of all victims, regardless of identity, regardless of where they live and how they represent themselves. The Violence Against Women Act is indeed for all victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, stalking, and dating violence. Our reach is from birth to the elderly. Our reach is from the able-bodied to the unable-bodied. As Kim stated, it is not about their identity or their politics. It is about the need for criminal justice response that's equitable and fair for all victims. It is about equitable and swift prosecution for sexual assaults, both on our land as well as the tribal lands. It is about making sure that there is no victim left unheard, no services left unmet, and no victim in this country that doesn't know that every one of us care. So at this point, we encourage the Senate leadership and Senator Reid to move swiftly, to take Violence Against Women Act to the floor so that we can then begin working bicameral to pass a bipartisan VAWA. Thank you.
Well, I really want to thank Senators Leahy and Crapo for introducing this bill and having us here today. And I really want to thank them for making the Violence Against Women Act a priority for reintroduction in the 113th Congress. There is no reason that this critical bill that's got such broad bipartisan support from such great leaders here should be put on the back burner and delayed any further. And there's no reason that Democrats and Republicans can't work together to get this bill passed as soon as possible. Clearly, we all agree that who a person loves or where they live or their immigration status should not determine whether they are protected from violence in this country. And I know none of us believe that a police officer should ever have to ask the sexual orientation or immigration status of a woman who lies bruised and battered at the scene of a crime. So I'm confident that there's an absolute will to get this bill done on behalf of all the victims in America who cannot wait one more day, as you heard so eloquently. It's a bill that has received strong bipartisan support in Congress. It has historically seen strong praise from law enforcement officers and prosecutors and judges and victim service providers and faith leaders and healthcare professionals, advocates, survivors. The list goes on. Everyone involved in this process wants this legislation to be as inclusive as possible, but I especially want to thank Senator Leahy for his efforts to bring all those who have a stake in this bill to the table. Because as we stand here today, the clock's ticking, and women across the country and men are watching, and we cannot afford any further delay. Not on this bill, not on this issue. So I hope we can get this to the Senate floor quickly. I really want to thank your leadership. I'm very proud to stand here on a bipartisan basis with senators, and I urge the House of Representatives to do the same.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. First, let me add my thanks to the two leaders of this effort, Senator Leahy and Senator Crapo, for making early introduction of this reauthorization a priority. But I also want to thank and commend all of the advocates who are here today. Whether you're involved in law enforcement, counseling, social services, healthcare, or public education and awareness campaigns, you are truly on the front lines of helping those who have been victims of violence. And it's your advocacy, speaking on behalf of those victims, that is so important to our ability to make this bill a priority and to get it passed. So it is with great gratitude that I recognize your efforts. The state of Maine is fortunate because it has a very low crime rate. But if you ask any law enforcement official in our state what the number 1 and 2 crime problems are, they will immediately tell you domestic violence and drugs. And indeed, those often go together. Domestic violence during the past decade has been responsible for approximately half of all of the murders that have occurred in the state of Maine. In the state of Maine, the 10-year average is 364 rapes a year. Think about that. That's one virtually every day in a state that has a very low crime rate. Since 1994, This program, the grants that are authorized under the Violence Against Women Act, have made such a difference. They've amounted to approximately $4.7 billion, but they have saved an estimated $14.8 billion in avoided costs, not to mention incalculable suffering. So this is a bill that we can argue actually saves money as well as improving the lives of the American people. We need your help. This is not a partisan issue. It cannot be a partisan issue. And I'm delighted to be here with this bipartisan group of Senate leaders today. Thank you.
And we have our last two speakers. Our last two speakers are both former prosecutors, Senator Klobuchar and Senator Ayotte.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to be a member of the Judiciary Committee under Senator Leahy's leadership, and I want to thank Senator Crapo, Senator Murray, all the senators that have worked so hard on this bill. I look out at all of you and I think, how many press conferences have we had about this? Many of you have been there, but I've decided that 13, as in 2013, is our lucky number, right? That we will finally get this done. And that is because the people of America want us to get this done. We have a strong group up here that has the ability to get this done. And you think about the fact that this has never been a partisan issue in the Senate. This has some roots in Minnesota with Paul and Sheila Wellstone, their longtime advocacy for this issue. I was a prosecutor when Paul was in the Senate, and Sheila would come to see our domestic violence service center in Hennepin County, which was cutting-edge, award-winning service center. It was just an example of when we can realize we can do things better so that victims and their kids can go to one place, and there's shelters there, and there were cops there, and there were prosecutors there, and they didn't have to walk through a maze and a gauntlet to get justice. That's really what this bill is about. And this bill is also about getting our laws as sophisticated as those that want to break them, whether it's people who are trying to use the internet or they're trying to stalk people over computers. That's a provision in there that former Senator Hutchinson and I included, or whether it's an acknowledgement that not all victims are the same and that we must respect the rights of victims, whether they're gay, whether they're immigrant, or whether they're Native American. So what I love about this bill is it took what was best about VAWA for so long and then put in some things that were necessary to keep up with the times. When I was a prosecutor, we always had a big poster right outside my wall, and we did all kinds of murder cases and burglaries and all those cases that capture the headlines, but it was always the domestic violence cases that really tore at your heart. And just to remind ourselves of that, because they still have a tendency to get forgotten when they're not in those headlines, we had this poster up, and it was a picture of a mom holding a baby, and she had a Band-Aid over her nose, and the poster said, "Beat your wife, and it's your son who will go to jail." And the point of the poster was this: victims of domestic violence are not just that one victim. They're an entire family, they're an entire community, and it is for our entire community that we need to get this bill done. Thank you.
Senator Ayotte.
Thank you. I want to join in thanking Senator Leahy and Senator Crapo for their leadership, and all of the senators that are here today on a bipartisan basis for their leadership in seeking the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. I'll never forget, I was a brand new, relatively new prosecutor, and in fact, my background is I was a murder prosecutor. I went to the first murder scene I had ever been to, and I'll never forget that scene because a woman named Tracy Winship was the victim, and a man named James Golightly was the defendant and the perpetrator, and he murdered her and then murdered himself. And I will never forget it because we went up into the scene. It was in the upstairs room of her house. She had a restraining order against him. He snuck into her house, went into the closet, and she went up into her room to get ready for bed, and he murdered her and then murdered himself. And I can only imagine, I remember walking into that scene thinking about the fear that she must have felt, even though she had a restraining order, when she saw him in her room. And in New Hampshire, just like in Maine, half of the murders that we have every year are domestic violence related. And every single victims come from every single demographic background, every single socioeconomic background, and absolutely, it doesn't matter what your background is as a victim. If you are a victim of violence, then you should, first of all, get all of the support you need and deserve, you and your family. And also, the defendants who commit these crimes need to be held accountable. We need to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act because this continues to be a critical need in our country. I am hopeful that the Senate will take this up very quickly, that the House in turn will pass it quickly, and we will make sure that the Violence Against Women Act gets reauthorized. And I want to say one more thing. I had the privilege of working with our Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence when I was Attorney General. I also had the opportunity to go to a support group meeting for victims of violence. And it's amazing the work done by our victim advocates every single day. You are the front line. And so I too want to express my gratitude for the difficult work. I think you have one of the most difficult jobs of any job to deal with someone who, first of all, has been through so much pain, so much suffering, and has so much fear still, because those perpetrators, they'll find a way to stalk these victims. And that's why the reauthorization of this act is also so important, to have support for our advocates and to recognize the importance of their work and to make sure that law enforcement and advocates have the right training and tools to address these types of crimes and to prevent them. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who spoke. I also note Senator Crapo, as said earlier, he has been such a strong supporter of this, and he has 2 meetings going on right now. That's why he had to leave. But, I listened to, these have been prosecutors, these have been advocates. Somehow, in this room, we're in a way, we're preachers are converted. But for 8 years, I went to every single murder scene that happened in my county. I still have nightmares of some of those. And I'd say in almost the vast majority of them, we kept asking this question, what if? What if somebody could have been there to have helped earlier? What if the person had had someone they could have gone to and said, I need help? What if there'd been a safe home? And when you stand there, this is not like a glamorized thing in a movie or television. You're standing there in the middle of the night, and you're watching what happened. And if you don't have those memories for the rest of your life, then you don't have a soul. What we have to do, however, is to lessen the number of people throughout this country who will have those memories, but far more importantly, lessen the number of victims. It won't stop all violence, but it will dramatically lower it. It'll give people a place to go. So I applaud the Republicans and Democrats alike who've joined on this. It is something that should be done. Nobody's in favor of violence. Well, let's all be in favor of stopping violence. Thank you. Thank you all very much.